My name is Anne Shotter, and as President of the Tarot Guild of Australia, it is my pleasure today to introduce Avril Price, who is a psychic medium, tarot consultant, and senior lecturer at the College of Psychic Studies in London, where she has been for 17 years. Her work at the college includes teaching all aspects of tarot, psychic development, and conducting workshops. She also runs overseas retreats. Avril regularly presents on radio, including her own kitchen sink spirituality program. She has also lectured widely throughout the world, having visited Greece, Crete, Istanbul, Finland, Germany, and she even introduced tarot to the North Pole. So we have with us today a very professional and experienced tarot lady. So over to you, Avril, to tell us more about yourself and what you've been up to recently, maybe.
Thank you very much, Anne, for that very lovely and warm welcome. And it gives me great pleasure to be able to speak to you today. And of course, the Tarot Guild that I think in Melbourne, I understand.
That's where it was created, yes. I think it was the first, well, I know we had the world's first tarot conference in 1993. So yes,
Wow.
from Melbourne.
So I'm just so happy to be able to make this connection. And of course, I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to be able to come and meet you properly,
Yes,
hopefully next year. And I know that we're going to have a really, really wonderful time because tarot is my thing. I'm a complete tarot geek. I live and breathe it. It's what I do literally 24/7. And it's given me so much in my life. And so the opportunity to be able to come down under, as it were, is just it's extremely exciting.
We'd love to be able to add Australia to your list.
yeah. I mean, actually, it's one of the deals that I did with Spirit, that should I be a good ambassador for Spirit, that I might be able to see something of the planet. And of course, over the years, little by little, it's happened.
Fantastic.
And I think that, you know, I'm very much a believer that Spirit sends you where it's good for you to go. And so I kind of I totally agree to that with them. And I'm going to be all yours at some point in the coming years.
We'll look forward to that.
But part of that drive is my desire and my passion with tarot, or for tarot. I've come to understand so much about myself, about the world I live in, about other people, about universal laws, the power of manifestation, and the power to will. It works on so many different levels and so many different ways. Obviously, from the predictive and the fortune telling, to the psychological and psychotherapeutic, to even something of the more scientific. And I think it was Papyrus that once said, if you ever got cast away on a desert island, all you would need is a set of tarot cards. There's so much in a deck of cards that is so fulfilling, on, as I say, on lots of different levels. And it's, you know, I think that we're lucky to witness tarot being or becoming more mainstream. I remember when I first started out as a neophyte medium, we were still very much in the margins. You know, we were these odd ladies, you know, violet and old lace.
Yes.
But we've really kind of transitioned tarot and indeed the intuitive skills since then. And it's lovely to be able to have such a wider reach. And I think that tarot could even be taught almost as a humanities in colleges and so on.
Wouldn't that
because
be
the philosophy behind it, I'd love to do that, Anne. That's another tick box.
Yes, I'd like to tick that one with you, but yes, fantastic that would be. I think you were so lucky to have a psychic college in London. If I was 20 years younger, I'd love to create one of those in Melbourne. That would be wonderful.
Well, the Psychic College, it's a bit of an old battleship, I have to say. It's been going on since 1882, and I'm very fond of the place. I mean, I've actually been at the college, must be 22 years now, because I was a student
Wow.
there as well. So I'm part of the furniture these days.
Mm,
Um, but I do consider myself very blessed to be able to have that as a spiritual home, if you like, and to offer my work, uh, you know, as to the college, and have my classes there, and so on and so forth. So I feel very much kind of intertwined in its wonderful and illustrious history, because of course we had Arthur Conan Doyle as
ah,
president there for 4 years.
wow.
And a lot of the luminaries of spiritualist history have crossed its threshold.
Oh,
Um,
goodness.
so you know, that's a talk in itself about the
Yes.
college, and
Yes.
it would be wonderful one day if you could come over and visit the place. And
I was intending to until COVID came up. I would have been there in September. So
oh,
a lot of us, I think, can't travel because of good old COVID.
I know what a
Mm,
dampener that's been this
yes, it
year.
has been, hasn't it?
But maybe that's something that we can look forward to in the coming year.
Yes, that's right. And your visit over here, of course, we're really looking forward to that. And I know today you're going to give us a little bit of a preview by
Indeed.
talking about intuitive tarot.
Yes. So in my talk, Anne, um, what I'm going to be doing is um, discussing how to prepare for an intuitive reading.
Mm-hmm.
We shall be looking at the difference between a structural reading and intuitive reading.
Great.
We shall be looking at some cards and seeing how they work intuitively. And then, if you don't mind being a bit of a guinea pig, Anne, we can
Love to
have a look
be.
at some examples.
All right.
Fabulous. So, okay, intuitive readings with tarot. There is a difference. Now, um, I teach with the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck,
So do
and
I.
marvelous. It's so good to have this in common. I'm very fond of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. I think, again, it's such a wonderful depository for so many arcane secrets.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the combination of Arthur Edward Waite and Pamela Coleman Smith, it was one of those dynamic duos that affords to go down in history. They just
Mm.
somehow connected wonderfully and created, which is become the mother of all tarot decks. And the reason I teach with it is because I think if you can get your head around the symbolism in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you can progress and work with most of the other decks. So it's a really great foundation to have. And it reflects the beauty of tarot so wonderfully, because again, there's so much incorporated into the symbolism. Everything from the Masonic, the Kabbalistic, Mithras, Babylonian, you name it, it's all in there if we want to unpack it. So uh, I do teach the traditional formats, the traditional meanings, the traditional symbolism behind the cards, and but the intuitive readings, it's less, you know, what we perceive as traditional meanings, but somehow still allowing those symbols to be little catalysts, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. But I think that when we work intuitively, I think it's really important to prepare for it, because you know, there is one thing that gets in the way of any intuitive reading, and that's the good old ego.
Mm.
And I mean, it's taken me a long time to kind of understand how providential having an ego can be. I mean, I was a Buddhist back in the day, and I thought, no, I mustn't have an ego. But I think the secret is being able to manage it.
Mm.
And in intuitive readings, frankly, there's no room for your ego, because you know, we want to be a pure connection between our spirit and our spirit team, if we want to, connect to that, but also to our own wisdom. Because the truth of the matter is, we can only intuit what we already know. A lot of people labor under this idea that being psychic or intuitive means that there's this sudden phenomena that happens, that you're just sitting there and suddenly, out of nowhere, you get this fantastic information that, somebody appointed you at being custodian of all this, ins and outs of what's going to be happening with people's lives and what's happening next and so on and so forth. But to be honest with you, the truth is much simpler and actually much more interesting. So we can only intuit what we already know. And by that we've already got the answer. One thing studying tarot for all these years has taught me is that the unconscious knows everything. The unconscious is the real curator of our life path. The unconscious is 80% responsible for how we shape our life. And in actual fact, what we inhabit in the external world, we've already created in the internal one. And so by making a healthy connection to the unconscious, we can see that, there's no such real thing as fate, but rather a happening that was inevitable to occur at some point as a product of steps that we've already taken in our life. It's a matter of consequence. So when we work intuitively, what we're actually doing is tapping into the already known quantity. But because it's in the unconscious, we're not conscious of it. And the unconscious longs to merge with the conscious world at all times. Now, again, this is where tarot is such a wonderful aspect to work with, because tarot gives the unconscious a voice. Now, when we work psychically or intuitively, a very similar thing happens as when we read the tarot images, insofar as that the unconscious speaks to us in a dreamscape. It doesn't have a voice, it doesn't have a language, but it's rich in symbolism. So it produces these symbols in order for us to interpret. And so the knack of working intuitively is having the confidence to read the symbols. And so in a way, tarot can act as that bridge between the conscious and the unconscious world. And that's where we speak of tarot being a mirror to the soul. And the mind and what we see in the mind, the pictures that we see in the mind, are the focal point of that mirror. When we work intuitively, then we have to put ourselves on one side so that we can engage in this wonderful symbolic language. And if the truth be known, the world wants to speak to us in symbolically all the time, whether we're psychic or not. In actual fact, what we do is that we are just reiterating a whole narrative of symbols that we meet each day to express our physical and material lives. But what happens when we don't get our ego out of the way is that it becomes cluttered with illusory ideas. Am I good enough? Have I got that right? Or I think my opinion is greater than what message is being given to me, and so on and so forth. And so we're not really truly connecting to the higher self, the highest source of our wisdom. And we're bringing that energy into the low, dense vibration that we understand as the earthly vibration. So what we need to do is raise our awareness, raise our consciousness, and just gently put the ordinary world out of the way on one side so that we can step into our extraordinary and magical selves, so that we can tap into that wisdom that is inherent within us. So what we need to do is just to sit and relax. And I'm going to take us through a little bit of a short visualization, if I may.
Yes, that'd be great.
So the important thing is just to be in your spot and just to be really aware of the space that you occupy, because the space that you occupy is what's holding your energy. And we just breathe our way into that space. And we become aware of our physical body. And what we're doing in this process, we're kind of handing it over to spirit. And we're trusting the process enough to let go. And we're going to breathe down into the bottom of our spine, down into our coccyx. And we're going to see that breath emerge as a column of light and take us down into the earth where Mother Earth holds us. And we offer our peace and blessings. We are children of the earth. And then we take that breath, we take that now into the heart center where we connect and breathe into the heart. And you can imagine yourselves being held by the white rose that we see in the Fool, that symbol of beauty and perfection and innocence. And where we're reminded that our spirit is free from all the constraints of the physical world. And then we take ourselves into the crown center. We can see perhaps yet another rose sitting on the top of our head. She's unfolded her petals, and we breathe through the center of the head, and we imagine our breath going as a column of light to the upper world, to the higher realms. We are children of spirit, and we take our message to our higher self, to our spirit co-creators and inspirers, that we're ready to work. We're ready to tap in to the power of our wisdom. And we just let all of the thoughts come and go. We don't attach to any of them. We just enjoy the quiet and the calm. And we put on one side all thoughts about work, all thoughts about our home, who we live with, our animals that we care for, so on and so forth. We put on one side all our expectations. Those all belong to the physical world. They don't belong to the world of spirit. And so little by little, we're bringing ourselves to our connection with our own spirit. And our own spirit very often gets so neglected in the general melee of everyday life. So we're affording ourselves that precious golden moment of connecting to our own spirit. Because when we are offering a reading, it's not human to human, but it's spirit to spirit. And it's not us that's doing the healing. It's not us that's doing the therapy. We're just holding the space. What we're actually doing is triggering off the mechanism in other people for their spirit to heal whatever needs to be done, or balanced or calibrated, whatever work needs to be done. And so what we do then is we just sit for a while, sit for a moment, and I've just taken you through a very brief connection. And you know, these grounding and visualizations, they don't have to be an hour long. We're not Zen Buddhists. They're more of an intention. It's about setting the intention that you're going to connect to your spirit self and to connect to your own treasure trove of wisdom. And then we're ready to work. So, when we work intuitively then, we're not going to work with the symbolism that we find in the card. So let me just take you through an example of what it is: structured symbolism and intuitive symbolism. So let me find a good one. Okay, the Chariot. And don't forget, Anne, you know that whatever cards come up, they're synchronistic for today. So there may be something as they appear for us all to take on board. So can you see the
Yes,
Chariot? I
yes,
hope it's the
perfectly.
gleam, isn't it? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just look at the structured elements. So we can see the charioteer. He's the magician who's also masquerading as Apollo. He's bringing in the sun energy. He has the moon on his epaulets, indicating that alchemical marriage between the sun and the moon. You know, he's underneath that canopy of stars. And you know, the discussion around the Chariot here, is there any such thing as free will, or are we determined by universal laws and planetary movements? We can see that he's standing in this framework which is not indistinct from that of the High Priestess. There is a connection insofar as that the dynamics that are going on in these cards are very much on the inner plane. It's the work of the psyche. Because this guy, he's got no control over what is pulling his chariot. He's, in some ways, you know, he's got to go with the wild forces that are pulling him around. But he's got one thing that is in control of his life dynamic, and that's his willpower. And in order for him to tap into his willpower, he's got to reach into his heart and to find out what it is that he really wants to do with his libido and his drive and his creative force. And we can see we've got the Shiva and Yoni Lingam with the wings of Mercury above, indicating again there's that creative force. We create everything, include especially our movement forward. That there's no way that we can keep living in one place all the time. The very cycles of life are going to always drive us ever on forward. We can see the square on his breastplate, indicating that we are spirit in matter and that we need to connect at all times between, you know, our physical self and our spirit self. And we, in fact, a lot of the conversation that we've had this morning has actually been just about that. This is a card of libido, it's a card of drive, it's a card of mastery of these wild forces and powers that pull us around in all kinds of different directions. And it's always about inner balance, that yin, that yang, the anima and the animus, the masculine and the feminine forces, because two hands clapping are better than one. And in actual fact, if we're going to successfully create anything, it has to be about inner harmony. And victory is assured if we connect the spirit to the physical self in order to move forward. So that's a brief look at the Chariot, which ultimately is about drive. And we can take that drive in terms of ego drive, sexual drive, health drive, to learning how to drive and getting a new car and so on and so forth. Now, if we were to work with this card intuitively, we'd actually look at the card in a completely different way, because symbolically it's going to mean something different, because we're not looking at it so much academically or what is a known quantity in the books. So if we were to look at this intuitively, what would come out is things like black and white. So, you know, perhaps this could, if we were asking about a situation, it might be telling us that there is no black and white to any situation. That, you know, and if we have a look at the charioteer, he's standing rather upright. So it might be about standing up for what you believe in. And because he looks very structured there in his chariot with his wand, which isn't particularly poised. It's that they're in the middle. You know, it's about having structure, and that it's, that the situation that one finds himself in, perhaps we need to break out of it a little bit, to think outside of the box, because we're in a bit of a grey area. We're getting a little bit stuck in our thoughts, so we're not able to move forward. And that perhaps we have to understand that when we're moving forward, there is no straight lines. That perhaps trying to put a black and white approach to something is not necessarily going to work. And of course, the reverse of that would be true as well, that we could say that maybe we need to put some order into a situation in order for us to glean, any sense of that. So we can see the difference between the academic and the intuitive. Let's go to another card, and let's go to the Two of Wands. So what would you see here, Anne? If you were to work at this intuitively, what would you see?
And I would just see someone looking. No, see, what I do is I zone in on a symbol, and that's what just happened then. So to me, what I'm zoning in on is the fact that this man's already been very successful in his life. So I'm looking at the globe of the world. That's what I'm intuitively focusing on. And, I'm sort of wondering in what way he's been successful, how he feels about his success, whether it's done for him or whether he wants to move into something new or whether he wants to continue on the path that he's been continuing on. I feel he's in a liminal space, sort of between,
I like that.
Between the past and the future. And he has to he's looking out at that sea, and the sea is, to me, sort of like the collective unconscious. So he's looking for inspiration from there, inspiration about what direction to move in, and water is always, I think, very inspirational, gives people inspiration. When we want to make a decision, often we'll go and walk near water, and I feel that's what he's doing. He's trying to see what he can see in the sea and get that inspiration to decide where he wants to go. But he's not quite sure yet, I don't think. That's what I feel intuitively about him.
No, thank you very much. And of course, the interesting thing about working with the cards intuitively, that there are many perspectives, because people have lots of different truths, and the wonderful work with it about intuitive tarot is that it fosters our own personal truths, because our wisdom is gleaned from how we perceive things. So and I can understand completely the symbolic connection, although I do have to say at this point that not everybody would be aware of the depth of some of the symbolic connections. So, again, one can only read intuitively into the card as what one knows. So, for me, what I see in this card, if I was to work this intuitively, is the man's very much alone. He's on his own, and he's holding on to that staff. And it's almost like he's needing to kind of support himself. That, that maybe, he's facing that big blue yonder, but you get a sense of that he knows that he's got something. He knows that he's onto something, but he's not quite ready to kind of step into that. That there's maybe a need for some courage. There's maybe a need for some confidence to kind of own his stuff. And we can see from his attire and how he's holding himself, that, you know, he's done well for himself, and that, you know, he's certainly not scratching about and foraging around in the dust, that, you know, he's come a long way. But in order to take that step, and I think what is interesting about this card, if we're talking about symbols here, connecting to inner wisdom, is that he's standing on top of a tower, which could be the tower in our deck, and he's standing on the tower before it falls. So we could be urged here that we have to do something before the inevitable catalyst of change happens. That we can stand on the tower and we can see far into the distance, but it may not be like that forever. So at some point, some kind of action must be taken. So we've got to gather our wits together and get on with what we need to do. But I think for me, what jumps out intuitively, and I think the secret to reading the cards intuitively, is to look at what symbols or what images in the card grab you first.
That's what I always do.
And for me, this is this guy standing there all his own. So there's a sense of that this is somebody who's perhaps had to make their way unsupported and all by themselves. And yet again, they've reached this point where they've got to make some life choices all by themselves. Maybe they want that support. Maybe they're crying out for that support. Maybe they've had to learn how to support themselves, but move forward they must, and that they can rely on their own ability to make those life choices because it stood them in good stead in the past. So that's one aspect of reading that intuitively. So when it comes to reading cards intuitively, as we've said, it's really important to look at what might jump out at you and not to kind of put an academic spin on it. Now, I think it's quite difficult for seasoned tarot readers to read the cards intuitively, because we're so used to the traditional symbolism. Plus, we've found a way of how the cards speak to us, which is our own intuitive dynamics. So, you know, we've all got our own little added nuances, and so. And that's why I think sometimes it's, when we read intuitively, it's almost like we've got to read them like a beginner all over again and forget all that we know. And that's another thing. That's why we've got to put ourselves on one side. So, Anne, is there something perhaps in your life that we could use and as example, something really simple that we could?
Let me think about that. Something I might want
that you might like to share, you know, that you don't mind sharing, that we could just use as a very brief and simple example.
I'm trying to think a very brief and simple example. What would that be? Okay, so, you know, we were speaking, you and I, before we went on air, I think, about travel. And
Yes.
A very simple question would be, you know, will I make it over to London again? That would be a very simple, sort of straightforward question.
Okay.
Fabulous. That's the
Fabulous.
only one I can think of, Avril.
No, I think it's a very good example. And why it's a good example, Anne? Because it's the type of thing that people would turn up to look at if they were in a consultation.
And I'm also in two minds about it as well. So I haven't got a decision in my head about it. Like, it's not as if I've made up my mind.
I shall try not to coerce you, Anne.
That's a good lesson in that, Avril. Yes.
Exactly. And exactly, because that I think we readers have to take that on board, that we have to override our own opinion that can sometimes masquerade as an intuitive connection. Yes. And you will find that I'm very hot on language. I try not to say need, I try not to say should, because I try not to empathize, because there is a real danger then of persuading something or people to do something in a kind of roundabout way that you want them to do. It has to be about people making up their own choices. So I shall try not to lead you astray, Anne. To lead you to our door, which would be lovely to have you there, of course. So okay, should Anne travel to London next year? Wheel of Fortune. Wouldn't you just know?
Yes, wouldn't you just know? That's so funny, Avril.
So how do we look at this intuitively? Because, and to do that, we've got to pretend that we don't have any knowledge of the symbols. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow those symbols to reach into our unconscious and to reach into our deeper self. And there's a real old hodgepodge of symbolism going on there.
You've made life difficult for yourself, haven't you?
Oh, this is the story of my life. My mother would agree with you
Yes.
there. Okay, so, but actually, if we look at that, what is interesting is it almost looks like a mandala, because you've got the circle in the middle of that perfectly framed square. We're squaring the circle. In other words, that we can see that things are going round and round because the red figure, who we know is the Typhon, as Anubis, but pretend we don't, we can actually see that that red figure is going round
That's what I thought
on that
too.
circle.
Yes.
So a wheel is in motion now.
Mm.
Now that's interesting. So that shows us that yes, indeed, you have already been thinking about it. And as a result, you will be taking some action about that further down the line, perhaps. And that could, at the moment, we don't know if that's going to be a yes or a no. But we can see that the ball is rolling. And that maybe there are certain fixed things around that you've got to do first. Maybe you've got to get some things out of the way first before you can even think about it. So it may be that you've got to complete some projects, that you've got to make sure that everything's going to be all right at home, because obviously if you come to London, you're not just going to come for a weekend, so you've got to be able to make sure that you can leave your home for long enough to be able to make the trip. And that you've got, when you come over, everything's got to be in order, that everything's got to be in balance, and that in some ways that there is an element in all of that I think you're leaving it to the lap of the gods. That you're looking for pointers, you're looking for little symbols saying, well, if it's meant to be, you're going to show me the right signs of when to come. And of course, interestingly, because of COVID, it is in the lap of the gods at the moment as to when and how we do indeed make those travel plans.
It's true.
So and it is an interesting card, because even though it's very fixed and very square, there is emotion in that. So we can say, there's something going, but we have to choose another card in order to kind of make some sense of that. So let's just randomly select from our face down pack. Temperance.
Right.
Oops. Now again, that's interesting. How would we read that intuitively? So there's this angelic force. Now we kind of associate angels with beings of light and healing and radiance and kind of as supreme guides, if you like. Now, if I was reading this intuitively, I would stick my neck out here, Anne, and I would say that I think it's your destiny to travel to London. That it could be that your beings in light, your spirit team, are indicating that that they want you to make that trip. That there's something there that's going to be a revelation to you. That's going to be interesting for your spirit. It's almost like a connection, a date with destiny, if you like. That there could indeed, if we go to deeper still, there could even be a past life connection with a life in the UK. Because I actually feel that it's just London that you're interested in. I feel as though you're going to be making a trip to the sea. And I feel that there's a soul connection to the British coast. And I feel that you could well be adding a few days onto your London trip to see something of the British countryside. Again, because I feel as though that there's a deep past life connection to England for you.
And my
And it's
husband
something,
is English too. I've been there lots of
ah,
times.
okay. So there's something very soulful there for you
Mm,
that you enjoy connecting with. It's very healing for you when you
mm.
go there on a deeply spiritual level. And, there's almost like an elevation of the spirits. Like when you return from one of those trips, you feel as though you've grown or evolved in some way. And it's telling me then that you're ready for that to happen. You're ready for that next stage of spiritual evolution and growth. I can never get this right, the left or right.
Now that's right. Wherever you put it, you can see it.
Yeah, I was getting a muddle.
No,
Um,
that's right.
so, but I do feel as though that, well, and I'm tuning into the word because words are catalysts as well. Catalysts for psychic triggers. And when I look at the word temperance, I'm not looking at the Victorian sense of it as abstinence. For me, temperance means to forge something,
Mm.
to create something, to make something happen. So I feel that next to the world card, it's about you've got to make it happen. And your soul is going to make sure that you do. And that's very interesting because with the Wheel of Fortune, it's about we can't leave things to fate. We can't become victims of fate and circumstance. We've got to be masters of our own destiny. And so it's ultimately, being captains of our own ship and making things happen, creating those opportunities. And so I feel that it's almost as if your spirit has its own cycle. And every now and again, you'll think, right, now is the time to go to England. Now is the time for my next step spiritually. Now is the time to take on board um, what I need to do for the next phase of my evolution and growth. Now, you see, if this was a reading, then that would be the very next place that I would go to. Is what does that actually look like to you? Because that's something we must kind of uh, think about. Is that readings are progressive? They're not. Yes, they're organic, but they have to have a resonance. A beginning, a middle, and an ending. There is always a point to a reading. It's not just psychic confetti. That it's our job as readers to kind of make a worthwhile narrative. Otherwise, it's just a nonsense. It's just, being like a psychic hailstorm of all this stuff being thrown at you, and it's like, well, what do I do with that? So we've got a nice little story going on here about you, Anne, if I may say, is that we've understood that you've got this connection to England, that you're wanting to come. The ball is in motion. We're thinking about how we're going to roll those wheels forward. We know it's a good thing. It's soul food for you to come. It's part of your destiny. There's an angelic resonance. It's part of your spiritual growth, evolution, and it's great affection there because your husband is English, and there's this past life stuff going on there. So, but then we have to say, well, and so to sum it up, we've got
Oh,
the Eight of Wands, which is absolutely about travel. And it's kind of say but we were talking about evolution, your evolution and growth. You know what, Anne? I think that you are really in tune with your own spirituality. and I think that you have a very strong connection to the universe. I can see that in this card, you have these amazing ideas, you have these amazing revelations, and you could be washing up, walking the dog, doing putting the stuff in the washing machine, and suddenly you'll get this flash of insight as to what makes the universe tick, or how people operate spiritually in the physical world, so on and so forth. And I really get the sense of you writing some of this stuff down, because we move on to the next year and poof, it's gone. And I feel that for you, the evolutionary step is actually writing it down in a book or a journal, some of these amazing insights, because I really get the sense that, you've got this amazing spiritual dynamic going on, but we're also very grounded in the material world, because we've got to go to work, we've got to, be grounded, we've got to have foot on floor. So I feel it's about making more room for yourself in order for you to express some of this spiritual eloquence and to be able to articulate some of these fantastic ideas, as part of your evolutionary process. So I feel that this coming year, we're going to be getting some of these ideas thick and thin. And I feel Spirit is really encouraging you to jot them down, do something with them, and almost like start putting together what your spiritual journey is about and what it's meant to you. So I feel that, intuitively speaking, next year is going to be a very spiritual year for you. It's going to be a culmination of lots of internal spiritual events. It's about you really owning that fabulous imagination which connects you so beautifully to the universe. And I feel it's about you being a voice for your connection to your spirit, and helping us to understand the universe from your perspective. So I hope that was insightful for you.
Wow. I feel so privileged to have had such a reading from you, Avril. That was, it was incredible. Thank you. I think I had
Oh,
a
you're very
psychic
welcome.
reading. I think we had a psychic reading in there. It felt like that to me. I think
And
you.
we could have gone on, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. It's my privilege, actually, to kind of share the journey with you,
And this has given
as
me.
fellow readers.
This has given me, and I hope all our viewers, an inkling into what you will be able to share with us when you do come to Australia. Because I certainly got a really good feel for how you work from what you've just shared with us. So I hope everyone else has too, and I'm really excited now. I can't wait for you to come. So
Oh,
I hope that we can move between countries as soon as possible. So maybe early next year, and maybe even later this year. So we'll have to see, won't we, how we can move.
yes, absolutely. And I'm, as I say, I'm really excited about coming myself. I'm really looking forward to meeting the Australian family.
And I know we're going to love you because your energy is a real fit for us. It's interesting.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I've just sort of got that. So it will be fantastic. You've got family in Australia too, haven't you, Avril?
I have a daughter who went to live out there, must be what, 2, 3 years ago now. She's in Queensland,
Mm-hmm.
and she's a very happy bunny, I have to say. She made the right choice for herself.
Well,
She's
she's in a
she's having she
beautiful place of Australia, beautiful part of Australia. Mm.
yeah, she has a lovely man. She's got a lovely life. Like I say, she made the right choice to go and live where she is, and she's very happy.
Well, that's wonderful. And it'd be nice when you can come and visit her on your trip.
Yeah, I'm so delighted. There's so
Mm.
much to look forward to. It's really exciting.
No, that's wonderful. So I just really want, on behalf of everyone, to thank you so much for today. It's been amazing. And I don't think I've ever had a public reading before. So that was a new experience for me, who's
Oh,
usually quite an introvert. So thank you.
oh no. Thank you for being so generous then with your spirit and your time and your life stuff. And I hope it was helpful.
Oh, it definitely was. And I love the process and seeing how you work. It was fantastic and just can't wait until you come. So on behalf of everyone, I'll say a formal goodbye and can't wait until we see you in person. Thank you,
Thank you very
Avril.
much, Anne. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.